to our last question of the night, which is this one right here. It is, why are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John called Gospels? And so if you turn to, and maybe not all Bibles are going to have this, but a lot of times when you turn to the very beginning of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you might have the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel according to Mark, Gospel according to Luke, Gospel according to John. And so why is it that these are really called Gospels? Well, one thing that we need to understand is the book titles are not inspired. God never inspired the book titles that we have. And so God did not inspire Matthew to be called Matthew, or John to be called John, or Genesis to be called Genesis, or anything like that. Those are labels that we have put on these books. And I'm not saying it's wrong, because where would we be if I said, please turn to the book of... I have something, right? Okay. So it helps us to get... Now, the book titles themselves are pretty much one of three things. It's either going to be something that deals with the subject of the book, it's going to be dealing with the human author of the book, or it's going to be dealing with the recipients of the book. And so Genesis is called Genesis because Genesis is just a fancy word for beginnings. And the book of Genesis is about beginnings, right? Okay, book of Exodus is about the Exodus, even though there's a whole lot more to the book than that. You know, just moving on, we have books as far as the names of the human authors, or what we think that the human authors were. So we've got Job's, we've got Isaiah, Jeremiah, we've got Daniel, we've got Malachi, we've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We've got recipients. We've got the letter to the church of Ephesus, or Ephesians, the letter to the church of the Colossians, you know, so on and so forth. So pretty much, you know, that's the way that the books go, okay? Now, as far as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John goes, very early on, people start to recognize that Matthew, God inspired Matthew to write Matthew, God inspired Mark to write Mark, God inspired Luke to write Luke, and John to write John. And they really started to, in fact, you know, in the Greek text today, we have just simply according to Matthew, according to Mark, according to Luke, according to John. And so when you think about according to this, it's kind of like, well, what according to that, right? And so, you know, when you just say according to Matthew, it's like, well, what about is according to Matthew? Well, it's about Jesus' life. Now, let's take a look at the book of Mark, chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, and the very first verse, it says, the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So, as far as the gospel of Mark, well, you know, it says the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ. And so this is the gospel about Jesus Christ. God is inspiring Mark to write, and so, you know, here it is. And so, you know, there is kind of a little bit of, okay, if we're going to fill in the blank according to Mark, then how about if we just put the word gospel according to Mark? By the way, the very first instances of where the four Gospels were, you know, afforded those titles, those designations, was in about 250 A.D. One of the early Christians, Justin Martyr, was the one that first wrote those words down. And so at least by 250 A.D., or 250 A.D., that's right. You know, those books were started to be called that, but then again, that's not, you know, not everybody called it that. So, you know, when you understand what the word gospel means, which is just simply good news, and you translate Mark 1:1, the beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, you know, you kind of understand, oh well, yeah, this is talking about Jesus, and it's talking about what Jesus did. And the same with Matthew, Luke, and John. And what's interesting about all four Gospels is they are back-weighted towards the end of his life. You don't find very much information about Jesus at the beginning of his life in all four Gospels. But what you do see is that the further you get to the cross, the further you get to the resurrection, the more material that's there. I can't remember the percentage of the breakdown, but I think that it was 60. If you take all the compilation of the Gospels and you put them together, like about 60% of the text that is there involve the last 6 months of Jesus' life. And so the main focus is on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus and what he did. Okay? And so, it kind of makes sense when you look at, the Gospels as far as the good news of Jesus Christ, not just simply the person of who he was, but, what he really came to do, which is to lay down his life for us. And it kind of makes sense. Yeah, that's why we got the Gospels. Okay. All right, you got any questions on that one?